As soon as the mic goes, there we go. All right, we'll jump right into this discussion about the evolution of virtual asset regulations, and we'll bring up the team that we're going to have. We have Byun, he's the Global Government Relations Officer for OKX, the crypto exchange. We've got Aruliah, Senior Policy Advisor for Elliptic Crypto Compliance, you probably know them. Amardeep, Thandi, Director for Crypto Regulatory and Compliance for Chainalysis. And we've got Kelvin, Yeung, the founder and CEO of HKD.com. Dimitros, Kavvathas, CEO for Group, and Chehade, Head of Regulatory, looking at Mara for Binance. I think Binance probably. Welcome up, guys. Let's jump right in, get our seating correct. Listen, everybody here knows that regulation is coming. So I have two very simple questions to start. We'll start with the good stuff first. Is what would good regulation look like? And then the other question is, what would be the disaster scenario? What don't you want regulation to look like? So let's just start with you, Tim. Grab that microphone. We know it's coming, right? Regulation. Hold on. I think, yeah, there we go.
Absolutely.
So what does good regulation look like?
You know, we all talk about the innovation that is right outside today. Good regulation requires innovation by the regulators. In contrast, I think for the crypto world and for virtual currencies, bad regulations are simply applying old traditional regulations to the crypto world.
Give me an example of that.
Yep. I use an analogy of trying to squeeze a square peg into a round hole. You know, I come from the US, and we have the Investment Act of the SEC, which was created in about the 1930s, and it requires certain things of the crypto world. But here in Dubai, what we're so anxious and excited about is by VARA, that has created a tailored, flexible, and what I call sound regulations for the crypto industry. I think they are innovating in by creating a tailored regulation where the crypto players could abide by and be responsible stewards in this industry.
Mark, good regulation, not easy to come by always. Just, you might have to click it up if it's not clicked up already. Give us one.
Hi, that's a tricky question. I'm an ex-regulator from the UK before I joined Elliptic. So I think when I see regulation across EMEA, I think there's always a tension between the legislators looking for economic growth and the regulator looking for investor protection. So it's having that right balance is really, really tricky. I don't see any jurisdiction getting it right as yet. So VARA has an opportunity, Dubai, MENA has an opportunity. I think it's about the legislator and the regulator working together in the same direction. When I say regulator, I'm talking about central banks as well as conduct and other prudential regulators. So it's moving the same direction. It doesn't mean weaker regulation, it means better, targeted, appropriate regulation. I think the other two things that would come to mind is the nature of the regulation. It has to do a few things. One is actually it has to give legal certainty to a regulator to take action. We'd call it the virus for a regulator to take action. But you also need to address innovation. So it's a balance between principles, detailed rules, and maybe code of conduct for industry to allow for that innovation. And this sector is highly innovative, so that you need to do that. I think the last thing that is needed is actually to set out regulatory expectation and clarity that is so important for firms to know where that space is that they should be doing business, rather than going to the nth degree, to the far right and saying, actually we need to do that because we're worried our regulator's going to come and hit us. So it's about educating both regulator and industry.
And what would you really not like to see? I'm not talking about any one country, any one region, but overall, what's something that probably everybody on this panel could disagree? You don't want to see that in the regulation. It could make life very difficult, not just for the companies, but overall for the wider market, Mark.
So to me, and in fact, you say, what we do see that in some of the first-tier regulatory jurisdictions in Europe. I think what we don't want to see is where regulators do not talk to the industry. We do not want regulation that is so inflexible that sets the parameters for you to do business and doesn't allow for innovation. I think that is probably the most important bit. Dialogue and flexibility. If you don't have flexibility, you'll slowly kill off the innovation in this sector.
And it is part of the reason that there is so much optimism, because I talked to lots of businesses from my time at CNN to Real Vision, and people are very optimistic here. Is that because we see dialogue in Dubai?
I think we see dialogue. We also see the legislator actually being positive and the regulator trying to drive that. That's the dialogue. But I think the question will be is what is the framework and what is the clarity of regulatory expectation? That is really important, not just for the jurisdiction, but to be perceived at an international level that this is a highly regulated jurisdiction, has flexibility for economic growth, but also high standards of market integrity and investor protection.
So a lot like a marriage, it all comes down to communication. Amardeep, I'm wondering, where you look at things from your perspective, clearly we know, correct, that it's all heading toward, there's going to be regulation. So again, an example of something that's what everybody's expecting, what needs to be there, and an example would really make people's lives difficult in the regulatory space for crypto and digital assets.
Yeah, I think.
Hold on.
Hello?
There we go. Nice and
Apologies.
loud.
So yeah, I totally agree with Mark. I think it is a balance. Let's take Mica for example. That is groundbreaking in what it's doing. We're going to allow flexibility across 27 nations and for VAS to operate across 27 nations, and it's going to bring consumer protection to 500 million consumers effectively in some of the most highest adopted areas when it comes to cryptocurrency. So there are clearly going to be a net positive in terms of benefits when MICA, when we speak about MICA. The things that are going to be the challenges, say the 200 million, cap put on stables. Now that's going to stifle the ecosystem, and to a certain extent, you do need to think about the balance there when it comes to kind of understanding stable coins. And to Mark's point as well, it's understanding where the ecosystem is heading. So for me, I think the biggest challenge that we see when we're speaking to regulators fundamentally is education. So I'm not talking about understanding how blockchain works. I'm understanding about, from an industry perspective, an ecosystem perspective, where actually is cryptocurrency, digital assets, and Web3 heading. And if they have that fundamental understanding, they're going to be able to then understand where the risks will lie, what protection they need to put in place for consumers. And I think that's the most important thing that I see missing really, is the education.
Do you mean the industry educating the regulators?
I think the dialogue between the regulators and where the ecosystem is heading, so speaking to people from an industry perspective, I think is vital, and something that Mark just touched on, I think is very important.
And in terms of something you really don't want to see, I mean, what's something that's a potential that could really make life difficult?
I think really when it comes down to it, it's pigeonholing digital assets and the ecosystem into traditional regulatory aspects of existing financial instruments. And I think there is a danger of that. You've got BlackRock coming into the game now, Citadel as well. You've got EDX, the Wall Street of crypto. And I think there really is going to be a risk here that a lot of the digital asset space could be confined into traditional financial instruments, and that's not something that we want to see from a new asset class.
Kelvin Yeung, founder and CEO of HKD.com. You're coming at this from a different perspective. Of course, you're based in Hong Kong. So I'm just wondering if we take a step back and look at the global regulatory framework, what's your perspective from where you sit?
Alright, here at the Hong Kong Digital Asset Exchange, HKD.com, we endeavor to build up a bank-grade digital asset exchange. So we have been willing to embrace the regulation and compliance in our establishment. So, because without regulation, it's a little bit hard for us to build our trust and credibility in the public. So, for instance, in Hong Kong, the legislation on virtual asset service provider licensing regime is still in process. So, what we can do is we have to obtain several international licenses and to open a very large-scale physical store to serve users to make them easy to seek help when they are facing some problem, to make us trustworthy and reliable. So that's costly, but and also to and also I don't think legislation legitimately development exchange will be encountered with legislation, because on the contrary, the legislation will help us, and as we are raising funds for our global expansion now, some regulation will give us more legitimacy, and which could help, which could lead institutional investor being more willing to finance us, which could help us grow. So I think the challenge is not for the virtual asset service provider, but the challenge is for the regulators, because the regulating crypto is problematic for a number of reasons. Since cryptocurrency and platform are built on new technology, that regulators need to get their heads around to before they can create a regulatory framework. So, but thanks to ever-increasing investment and evolution in crypto, there are tons of new technology and tools coming out every week. So that will further complicate the difficult job for the regulators. Also, furthermore, like other technologies, things can be used for good things and things can be used for bad things, and it's quite. For example, there are both positive and negative benefits of using crypto and technologies. So how can regulators to encourage positive where they can control the negative and also the issue for them to consider.
Thanks, Kelvin. That gives a lot of. Well, I think you're looking again, clarity. Dimitros, where you're looking from, we all know we're going to get regulation. What would be a type of framework that you'd expect to see coming from most of the major markets?
So
we might have Kelvin pass you the microphone.
all right. So
If you could pass it to Dimitros.
So in most jurisdictions, we have some clarity emerging. And taking a step back, I would think in most cases, enforcement is what's lacking, not regulation. The US has had a regulatory framework across the CFTC, the SEC, the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, and at times they have, in a framework that you work by clarifying precedent, right? They could have many occasions that would have established that all along. So just a little bit more, and obviously now we have these guidelines that have been promulgated that soon after the midterm elections will eventually turn into some law and then regulations. In Europe, we have some clarity. In most jurisdictions, we do, right? So I would say till that time, there are enough basic guidelines that need to be respected. And I would think most of the time they are still kind of not being done so. So I wouldn't say that. So there is a global framework emerging that exists, a global framework of how you conduct any business, let alone financial instrument business. So it's just a matter of not too much talking about it and regulators doing their part, acting more efficiently perhaps, because they have plenty of rules they can apply and there are plenty of rules being developed as we speak. So I'll leave there.
But I just have a question. When you say enforcement, because usually you don't think of private industry saying we want more enforcement. Is that because you want there to be a more level playing field when you look at competitors?
Yeah, I would say, let's say what happened in the US with Celsius, Voyager, and so on, right? The regulator went after Coinbase when they tried to launch a similar product, and they just let everyone else just do whatever they like, right? So there are quite a few occasions in other jurisdictions similarly. It's a matter of, like, the drunk person searches for his keys under the lamp because it's closer, right? So,
Yeah.
so I think that analogy exists across jurisdictions.
I like that analogy. Alex, getting to you, is enforcement key in your eyes as well?
Enforcement is important.
A little louder if you can. No, I think it's. We'll play a little.
Better?
That's
Yeah,
better.
Enforcement's important, but what you've got to understand is the regulators need to be a force for good for the ecosystem, especially with the global marketplace and the ability for businesses and consumers to engage with global businesses. So the regulator has a jurisdiction, but maybe the companies and the clientele aren't quite as ring-fenced. And so it needs to be attractive for businesses, which it is here in Vara. They're building an ecosystem which is virtual asset specific, and it's quite a clear regulatory framework that we're all working towards. And for us, it allows us to build and invest for the future in this ecosystem and provide a sort of safe marketplace for investors here and a sort of safe haven for people to come to transact. You're never going to be able to police the entire globe, but you can at least police the jurisdiction and the area and the companies that you're looking after.
I'm curious, I mean, do you think that given some of the crackdowns that we've seen in other countries, outright removal of industries, do you think there's a very specific time frame for Dubai to act? I mean, I interview lots of companies that really because of COVID restrictions in Asia, and I don't just mean China, I mean all across the Asia Pacific really, have had to relocate here. And I often wonder if those companies are staying here. So do you think the window could be pretty tight?
It definitely is. Dubai is pushing to be a first mover. I mean, it's not the earliest of innovators. Along, and you'll be caught short if you're not at the edge of innovation there.
And what do you think is driving that? Is just the general spirit? I mean, Dubai is pushing in a lot of industries, but why here more than other places?
Dubai, the leadership of Dubai are very open to Web 3.0, and it's come from the top down that they want this to be the focal point of the digital economy, and there's obviously a push for the region as well to move away from hydrocarbons, and this is the push that they're enabling for all ecosystem players such as ourselves.
Tim, I want to come back to you. Tim, you're on microphone 3, so I just want to give the guys a little heads up while we make sure it's on, while I get to the next question. I mean, what do you think Dubai has to do with this framework to achieve that status as crypto hub? I mean, I think it's already become one, but I think in the way that Dubai wants to be. It's very aspirational, and folks here make that known. So what do they have to do?
Number one, I think they need to be working with the community, and absolutely they're on the right track for that. You mentioned that they have very high aspirations for the ecosystem, and they do. And so, you know, we were non-existent in Dubai just 6 months ago, but now we have an office at the DWTC. We've hired 15 local officers and staff so far. We expect to double that by the end of this year. We already have the provisional license, and we look forward to getting the full MVP license and to turn on our platform. You know, getting back to your prior question, there is actually a window of opportunity. We never know how things are going to come out, even for the industry. Right now, we're faced with the crypto winter, right? So it's difficult in that regards. Our economics, is in a period of rising rates. And who's to say whether it's going to be a soft landing, soft recession, but it's never that steady or linear. And so I think there is definitely a window of opportunity. We look forward to planting our seeds and foundation in Dubai, and we look forward to growing that as well as in other parts of the world. I think it's really incumbent on the regulators to just, you can think of it as farming. Just provide a good, fertile soil and let us, hopefully bring good, worthy, long-term innovations to the community.
Yeah, it's really important to put that in the macro context. Nobody's sure. I mean, I'm a host at Real Vision. We have some of the brightest minds in macro finance, and there are two very, very different camps. I mean, there are more than two, but the emergent ones are two very different camps about where things are heading. Mark, I'm curious to know, especially given your role at Elliptic, what's the role for analytics to play in this regulatory framework? The global one, VARA here in Dubai, where does analytics sit in that?
So, can you? Yep.
If you just take it a little closer to your mouth.
So I think, analytics plays a part of it. Some of the AML risk for a firm is traditional. I think, so I do the 80-20 split. There's 20% of on-chain data, which as a crypto firm, you need to take into account. That includes the normal kind of transaction monitorings that you do. I think the difficulty is that as analytic firms develop, the criminals also get more sophisticated. And the FATF report more recently talks about cross-bridge. So basically, people don't just, if you like, try and hide activity within the Ethereum chain. It goes from one chain to another chain, goes to a mixer. So it's a very complex typology that is building. We need to keep up with that. And then importantly, we need to make it simple for the clients to be able to screen and understand risk. That's not always an easy ask, really. But I think it's keeping up with the criminals because they are constantly evolving. We need to evolve with them, and regulators need to evolve their understanding, and so do firms.
Amardeep, how do companies prepare for this? What do you do? What do you recommend to a company like yours to get going and get ahead of these? What types of tools need to be in place in the war chest, really? Because, of course, it is competitive at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think it's always going to be a challenge. The rate in which the innovation in the ecosystem is evolving, legislation's always going to be playing catch up, and we at Chainalysis, pride ourselves of having the best data and the underlying data lake that provides the platform and the compliance suite of solutions for crypto businesses, financial institutions to start their journey into the digital asset space. But I actually wanted to just step back and go back to one of your previous questions, because I think that's really important for today and where we are, because to really achieve that crypto hub status on a global level, I think what you need to do is be able to provide the education to the nation, which will build the trust, but then also really have the regulators, not only from kind of speaking to the industry, but also correspondence from regulators to national security, to cyber outfits. And I think this is what's really going to differentiate nations and create this crypto hub status really for individuals, nations, is going to be when national security, InfoSec, regulators, and obviously VASPs and so forth are all interconnected. You're going to decrease illicit activity in the nation. That's obviously going to build trust within the population, and therefore you've got a safer environment for people to operate and to invest in that space.
That's actually quite profound what you're saying. And actually, I was the first reporter to ever report on Bitcoin for CNN back in 2013. And people always ask me, is Bitcoin going to last? And I say, well, that's not my job as a journalist. My job as a journalist is to come look. But I have to say, one of the first times where I said, aha, blockchain is, I can say this on air now, blockchain is going to work because I came to a university here at Dubai, and to get people's transcripts, their grades, their marks, they were doing it on the blockchain. And I thought that's really profound to start blockchain at that level. I mean, that really gets into the fabric of a country. I mean, any examples? I hear you loud and clear, but any tangible examples of what you mean by that education? And of course, different parts of the government working together to understand anything from finance to blockchain to crypto helps. But is there a specific strand you could give me where if the regulator here knows this and the defense agencies know that, this is where it all can come together?
Yeah, sure. I mean, for example, when you're operating any kind of financial institution and you're submitting a suspicious activity report, for example, that's going to filter through to the FIUs and therefore then it's going to be investigated. Now, if there was certain intelligence and there was a way for kind of law enforcement to understand certain crypto addresses, certain entities within the nation, then for regulators, for example, to have the analytical capability to be able to supervise the VASPs, understand the inflows, outflows of Tether, understand kind of the posture of the nation when it comes to, what's the makeup of the digital asset flow, to actually really understand the fundamental risks. That's where I'm kind of coming from here. So if, for example, a nation has, 70% outflows and inflows of US dollar Tether, they may want to diversify, they might want to potentially take the micro route of putting a cap. And it's these kind of insights that are going to allow kind of regulators, law enforcement to come together and to really analyze what's happening in their nation.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, as a journalist, when you look at something, you look at a profound change in an ecosystem. That's where you go to a place like San Francisco, where you're based, and you see that whole ecosystem was developing to help Silicon Valley become what it became. And that's where you look at something, you see it's got to be that whole 360-degree view in order for something to become a hub. Kelvin, I want to come back to you for a second, because I think so much when we're talking about windows, opportunities, the macro global picture, so much hinges right now on what happens in Asia. Reopenings in Asia, reopenings in China, other countries as well. I'm curious to see from your perspective what you think the next 6 months will look like throughout the region, because things have happened very out of sync, region to region, especially with COVID. I mean, here we are a couple years on, but I think so much hinges on what happens with Asia and the reopening right now.
All right. So as I come from Hong Kong, so
Yeah,
I will
I
introduce
know.
something about Hong Kong's legislation on virtual access service provider licensing regime. Since actually this legislation is still in drafted form, but as hopefully it will be approved in several months, and then all the service provider in this industry have to be obtaining a license to operation crypto exchange business in Hong Kong. So I think and it's a good signal for us that we have endeavored to build up a very trustworthy and reliable image to the public, and also as I said before, and as long as we get the lessons, and it's very useful for us to raising fund, as the lessons give us the legitimacy which will lead the institutional investor being more willing to finance us. So, and as I can see, as I can foresee, that much more international standard will about the regulatory framework will be laid down, and I think I hope I can see a promising future of this industry and can help us grow.
But I guess, I mean, just more on a more kind of basic level, do you feel like life is getting back to normal? Obviously, mainland China is one thing, Hong Kong's a different thing, but I'm talking about the whole gamut. I mean, I know companies that were in Singapore, Taiwan, that are here now, temporarily, in theory, but I'm just wondering, do you feel how day-to-day life is coming back, and business life, more importantly?
All right. Speaking of China, actually, I think the the global market is very large. Let I will leave China market alone. All right,
Yeah, of
and I
course.
will explore much more in the global market. As last week, I went to Indonesia, and I was trying to apply for a exchange license in Indonesia, and also because there's the fourth largest population in the world and a very huge market as well. And last year I came here and I came here I participate in this exhibition as a visitor, and I definitely felt that there's a huge market in UAE as well. So
Yep.
I went to DMCC to apply for a crypto commodity trading license as well, and I obtained that. So this is a huge market. I won't attach high importance in mainland China, but the global market.
Dimitros, preparing for this regulatory environment, what can companies do right now with VARA, with that legislation coming down, regulatory framework coming down the chain? How do you prepare now? What number?
Yeah, no,
There we
it's
go.
okay. So they are actually very constructive and engage very well in terms of sharing with us what needs to be done, and I think they do the same with everyone. I would say what they are doing more is to engage the broader service providers that need to help. So still there are no banks that open client money accounts in the UAE, right? So how can you have 43 provisional licensed entities that cannot open bank accounts, and how can you do your business? I think they are already working towards engaging with other regulators that are constructive on digital assets that could help the business become a global hub. Let's say working with the other, even within Dubai, with Bahrain perhaps, with the ADGM, and others in Europe perhaps too. So I would say the guidance is clear on what needs to be done, but there are lots of elements that are still being worked on, and we all need to be patient about.
Perfect. And Alex, just given your role, head of regulatory at Binance, I'm going to ask you to finish out this panel with a little bit of a crypto ball, not a prediction. I'm just curious, where do you think we'll be this time next year? The whole industry, VARA, where do you suspect, not guess, but where do you suspect it will be at Future Blockchain Summit next year?
Well, the idea is this time next year, VARA Dubai have taken the lead, and they'll be the sort of North Star where the rest of the world and the rest of the regulators have looked at and seen what's worked, seen the sorts of engagements with different stakeholders, the tech providers, the other regulators in region, to produce an ecosystem that's worked well and has built the ecosystem, brought in new companies, improved innovation, and really grown the ecosystem. So it'd be a much more mature status at that point, and the decisions will be much more downstream on the nitty-gritty rather than the sort of key levels that we're looking at the moment.
I just want to summarize what I've heard on stage here. Biggest points I think we heard, especially Mark, I think you used a keyword, clarity, clarity, clarity. Even if there's regulation that maybe a particular industry isn't so keen on, if they get the clarity about it, that can make all the difference. Amardeep, I loved what you talk about with education. I mean, that being so crucial. If you really want to be transformative, it does have to be 360. And I really think that enforcement, Dimitros, what you said there, enforcement is key for some of these same reasons. You can have all of these laws on the books, you can have a lot of regulatory framework, but if you're not enforcing them, if you're just going after one, what does it really mean? Does it really send a message if it's just going after the big companies, especially when we're in a space where so many companies are operating? So Alex, Dimitros, Kelvin, Amardeep, Mark, Tim, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Scan the MC for this stage. And I want to thank you for spending time with us. Our next panel is going to be focusing on digital identity, SSID, single sign-on, and where things are going with that. And we have a very distinguished panel. I'm very excited for you to meet the panelists. Michelle is joining us from Kidco out of New York. She's been with Bloomberg TV. She understands the space. Come on up here, Michelle. Michelle, you actually have some of my favorite people on your panel. Dr. Marwan, Alex, this is a treat. And I know you have a bunch of topics you want to go after on SSID and identity. It's a tricky topic. You want to test your mic real quick?
Testing, testing.
There you go.
Hello, everyone.
The panel is yours. Go for it.
All right. Thank you, Ken. Okay, great to be here with you, everyone. Good morning. Great to make it to Dubai. Now, obviously, getting into Dubai, I had to show, having a bit of feedback here. Getting into Dubai, I had to show my passport, which is pretty standard because gaining access to everything in society these days requires us to show some form of identification. And that's the topic of our panel. So I'm going to bring our panelists up on stage and then take it from there. So let's bring up firstly David Magod. He's a senior advisor to the Swedish government and co-chair of the Swedish government representative of the European Blockchain Partnership. There he is, David. Stand here for now. Thanks, David. All right, we've got Nina Dukazov, head of the project group for the new economy and blockchain technologies at the Ministry of Economic Development and Technology in Slovenia. Can you guys hear me over there? You guys can't hear me. All right, we have Alexander Bornikov, Deputy Minister of the Ukrainian Ministry of Digital Transformation for IT Development. Dr. Sid Ahmad Benarun, the Dubai government advisor to the Dubai Police. There he is. And last but not least, we have Dr. Marwan Al-Zaruni, strategic advisor at the Digital Dubai Authority. Now, you're saying, can you guys hear me over there? No? I guess not. I guess by the fact that nobody's saying yes, nobody can hear me over there. No. All right. That's going to be a bit of a problem if my panelists can't hear me. Can you guys hear me now? All right. No? Yeah? Okay. That is much better. All right. Well, thanks, everyone. As I said, I'm Michelle McCory, editor-in-chief and lead anchor at Kidco News, and it's great to be here in Dubai this morning. And getting to Dubai, of course, I had to show my passport, as we all did, because showing ID is an essential part of gaining access to society. In fact, from our birth certificate to our death certificate and everything in between, educational diplomas and degrees, marriage licenses, driver's licenses, work permits, we all require official documentation to gain access to services offered in the public and private sector. And now blockchain technology is transforming the way that we're able to show our digital ID and gain access to all of these public and private service sectors. But what are the benefits and what are the risks? How far along are we in the process? What does the future hold? And are the interests of governments and citizens indeed really fully aligned on this process? And as I said, we've got a great panel to discuss this. And David, I'm going to start with you. As we said, David is a senior advisor to the Swedish government and co-chair of the Swedish government representative of the European Blockchain Partnership. And ladies and gentlemen, what I'd like to do is start off with an overview of some of the self-sovereign identity programs offered in your regions and countries, and then drill down into the bigger issues that pertain to all of them commonly. Okay, thank you. So, David, as we said, we have the self-sovereign identity framework in the EU. The EU already regulates digital signatures through the EIDAS legislation, currently has the ESSIF in place, building on the European Blockchain Partnership. Why don't you start off, please, David, with giving us an overview of what exactly that is?
Okay. Does this work? Seems to? Yeah? Okay, good. So basically, it's a bit two separate things. We have the EIDAS, which is the regulation of electronic identification in Europe. Then we have the European Blockchain Partnership, which I'm mostly involved with. It's more of innovation project at the moment, but it's starting to go to a production stage. What we do is we have a regulatory framework for it, pretty much. We have a governance structure, we have a technical infrastructure, and now we're adding the identity layer to the infrastructure, and that identity layer is the SIF. So it's based on self-sovereign identity principles, meaning that the individual should be in control of their own data and their data, their own identity. Of course, this is a way to digitize and digitize the way we use our identity. Now we have our passports or driver's license, whatever, and we want that to be able to be used in a digital manner, also cross-border, of course. So it's not ready, but I think we're starting to get there.
Okay, David, going to stick with you. Come here, show my passport, right? How do I physically show my digital ID? What is the hardware or the tech that I'm going to be using to show this? Is this on my smartphone, for example?
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of different layers. So you need to, what we're looking at now in the EU is a digital wallet. So you need to have a digital wallet to have your credential into, which you can then show. If the credential and the digital wallet should be based on blockchain is not decided, blockchain might be useful in some ways because you decentralize the way the identity is managed. So instead of have a central point or central authority that can basically control your identity when it comes to digitalization, the digital world, we decentralize the infrastructure, so you are in more control of your identity as to if there was a central authority. What you actually show, I mean, it can be anything.
What I physically show.
Yeah, I mean, your mobile phone up
My
a
mobile
QR
phone.
code, and of course that has to be integrated in a technical infrastructure.
Okay, we're going to get back to the aspect of the physical technology required for this now and in the future, but let's elaborate a little bit more on this. And for that, let's bring in Nina, who represents the government of Slovenia, obviously an EU member state. And in fact, Slovenia was one of the earliest blockchain adopters in Europe, I believe, having started looking at blockchain technology in 2017. So very much ahead of the game there. So Nina, why don't you explain to us, when we say self-sovereign, how much is the individual really in charge of this program? We can't hear you there.
1, 2. Is better now?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for the question. First, I would like to say that, yes, we really were one of the top countries to 17 and 18. But we managed to keep the most innovative projects going on, okay? And what we found out that in the moment we developed the technology at the rate that it enables the ownership of the data, the valuation of the ownership of the data, and the transfer of the data peer-to-peer, not intermediaries, it can bring the value to the data. This is the first thing. At the same time, we started, as David said, at the beginning, we started to develop that self-sovereign identity also on the European level. And what was very important, that process was going on with the technology. As the technology developed, the process of self-sovereign identity developed. We had actually, I need to say that we based on 3 types of digital identifiers. First was that physical identifier. What we have, you asked, what can you show? Okay, we can show on our IDs or passports the main data that is meant like physical identifiers. Then we have biometric identifiers. Right. We also adopted the legislation on biometrics recently. And then we have a descriptional identifiers, which Meta is using, for example, for identifying the characteristics of the person. And when we come to this stage, we need to ensure that this data is highly protected and is highly owned by the person that wants to put it on the platform to be visible.
Well, to what degrees then are users fully in charge of the data that they put out there? Nina, we'll keep that with the European Self-Sovereign Identity Program for now. What is within the user's capability to put on the blockchain, to be in charge of the data, and to be in charge in terms of who can access the data?
The user's capability is to define how much data he will put on the blockchain, okay? What amount of data will be visible or accessible to the public, and what amount of the data will be kept in private. We have GDPR. You probably know that this is general
Right.
protection regulation, okay? And we are quite strict in putting the data on the blockchain.
And of course, privacy and access is a big issue which pertains to all digital data on the blockchain at large. We're going to get the full panel's opinion on this, but let's continue to break down the various programs. And Alex, the Ukraine already has a digital ID called DIA. The goal of making 100% of public services available online by 2024. That's incredibly impressive, especially considering the fact that Ukraine is currently struggling with a war at the same time, but is certainly being victorious in its digital blockchain transformation process. And Ukraine has actually also passed a law to make refusal to accept digital documents and digital ID illegal. So very ahead of the game there. Why don't you give us a brief overview, please, Alex, of the DIA app?
Oh, yeah, sure. Well, I think that's the real example of digital ID that a majority of Ukrainian population uses. To speak numbers, from 40 million population of Ukrainians, DIA app, which contains your digital passport, digital driver license, car insurance, car title, your tax ID number, identification, birth certificate for your children. You can store them and actually travel with them, so you don't need a paper copy. And also you can pay taxes from this app. You can also see if government has something on you, like if there's a court case or something, you can see in the app that you are summoned or something like that. So the next step that we were doing, actually, maybe just being ahead of me, but we also wanted to implement a section where you as a customer or citizen, you can see who is from government authority accessing your information and why. So like if your information in a registry and some government authority decided to check up on you, so you see that this is being done, so they're requesting this. And this was a huge success actually, because so far almost 20 million people downloaded this app. And when the war started, people were fleeing from homes, and sometimes they were not able to get their passports or their papers. So the DIA was the only thing that they were possessing in the moment of the despair. And we actually made amendments to the law, so they were passing European border just with app. So they were showing app. Like I have it too. So it's basically like you show a passport, and when you press, there's a QR code which generates instant request to database of all the passports in Ukraine. Of Ukrainians, and this way you can actually check if there's if it's not a screenshot or it's not fake. But now it's done on centralized way approach. So we are now preparing an amendments to the law, because according to Ukrainian law, all the registers must be centralized. It's like old stuff, and it's about security. It has security background, but we want to do this on. We want to amend this law and allow Ukrainian government to use distributed ledger technologies. So this is going to be next step. So we're going to bring this technology on blockchain soon.
Now, given that this
that's the brief.
That's the brief. Very quickly, given that this is an app on one's phone, there's a lot of data that comes with this app, including tracking data. Can the user opt in and opt out of what kind of tracking data is accessed?
Well, the thing is that the app itself, it doesn't store your data. So it's basically, the concept is that there are registers, and the government basically know one way or another, it knows everything about you. And you can actually opt out, because once you gave them this data, it's like forever there. But there's a huge debate in our team in order to give people ability to opt out and delete it. And the answer is that for part of information you can do that, but for part you cannot opt out. It's like, for example, you was born, and then there's a register that somewhere it's written that you was born and your parents are the following people. You can't delete this information. Like maybe you want this, but no. I'm sorry, but no.
Well, personally, I don't want to delete that kind of background information about myself, but I hear your point, larger point there. All right, let's bring in Dr. Marwan Al-Zaruni. Of course, Dubai has been a digital leader. Dubai is the world's first government to go completely paperless. So that in itself is a huge accomplishment. And the UAE, in fact, has been ahead of the game with the UAE Pass. So why don't you give us a quick overview of the UAE Pass, the national digital identity and digital signature solution offered by the UAE?
First of all, thank you for having me. I don't know if everybody can hear me clearly. Louder? Okay. So UAE Pass has been there since 2016. We actually started with identity. We moved very quickly to Root Certificate Authority for digital signatures as well. So it's not only your digital identity signed by a Root Certificate Authority, but it's also a digital signature platform. It is also a single sign-on solution, all in one app. It's a super app to log you in every government service that is in the Dubai level, as well as on the most of the federal levels in the UAE, including other states levels. So the UAE is 7 emirates, and you can use UAE Pass in all of the seven emirates on the local services, as well as on the federal services. Also for paying for things like bills, utilities, and that kind of stuff. We have an app called Dubai Now, and it's basically a universal wallet. You only have to connect it to your bank or credit card, and then you can pay for all services seamlessly without any friction, with the integration of UAE Pass as a login credential. In addition to that, we have what we call a vault, where all your documents, like Ukraine is doing, all are in a central database, and you seamlessly can pull them or send documents to appropriate parties. For example, you can retrieve your passport copy and send it to somebody, or you can only show them the QR code, which is valid for 5 minutes, so they cannot make a copy of it. That 5 minutes enables them to verify that it is who you claim you are. And of course, in the future, there's going to be much more features coming up, including all the stuff around Web3 and beyond, and self-sovereign identity, zero knowledge proof, all these kind of nice features that are value adds for digital identities.
What are you seeing, Dr. Marwan, in terms of adoption rates? At the moment, this is not a mandatory program, is that correct? So how are citizens accepting this? Are we seeing high adoption rates so far?
So we just launched, actually, before GITEX, what is called digital onboarding for visitors. So you don't even have to have a UAE identity to actually be able to get UAE Pass and do all the government services that you actually, that kind of a visitor kind of persona enables you to do. And it's self-onboarding, fully digital. You just do it, do your biometrics through your own phone, and that's it. You are from the day one, as soon as you enter the UAE, you are eligible to get UAE Pass.
All right, well, I'm sure that it's very useful, especially in scenarios where one loses one's passport, for example. And Dr. Sid, you've been advising the police, the Dubai police, and one of, to me, sounded like a fantastic initiative is the blockchain program to get you a digital passport within 24 hours. I've certainly been in a situation where that kind of solution would have been very much appreciated. Why don't you start off by giving us an overview of the lost passport program that the Dubai police has now implemented.
Yes, happy to do that. Thank you for the invitation and thank you for all the clarification about these programs. Like many other government agencies, we launched about 2 years ago the Lost Passport Initiative. And prior to this initiative, if you happen to have lost your passport, you would have probably to go to 3 or 4 agencies to make the same request or to make the same complaint. We've been working on this, and we already have been getting actually some very, very good feedback from users and customers. So currently, if you lose your passport, your first gateway is always a police station, is always the smart police station or the traditional police station. So that's where you go. And from there, once you enroll or once you register the complaint, Dubai police takes from there. We work with the Dubai court, we work with the Dubai prosecution, we work with other agencies, with the immigration national identity. So you have only one stop in which you can make the complaint, but most importantly, you get the information and the updates as you go. So it has been actually a great service that we have delivered to our customers, to our users, to the citizen and the visitors of this country. But I think this comes as a realization of the vision of the Dubai government and His Highness Sheikh Mohammed to go paperless, first of all, for the government, but more importantly, to digitize all government services. So Dubai Police is a destination for other visitors.
Yeah, as we said, Dubai, first city to go 100% paperless, a huge accomplishment there. Sticking with you, Dr. Sid, having a digital ID, how does that now impact the issue of identity fraud and identity theft?
It's very important, first of all, to mention we are at the early stages of the implementation of this program. The onboarding, as it has mentioned, we have a lot of people coming to us with this request, but it's also important to mention that education awareness are also important. You can't simply implement a new initiative, a decentralized initiative, with a centralized mentality or centralized mindset. You have to do a lot of work. You have to do a lot of information, a lot of awareness for people to understand what exactly they need to do when they come to our services, what are the type of steps they have to do, and what are the things that they are willing to give up and the things they do not want to give up. So that's a conversation that we constantly have with our users, with the people that we interact with. And I think we have done pretty much a good job, as many other agencies, government agencies have done, like DIWA, RTA, DP, Dubai World, Dubai World, all these organizations, all these agencies have done a good job in implementing this project.
Absolutely, but you have really been ahead of the game. The Dubai police have launched their own NFT program, for example. Can you give us a quick overview of some of the blockchain initiatives that you are working on?
Yes, this was one important blockchain project. We have the NFT project, as you said it. So we have many products on our Dubai Police store. If you want to go to the store and you pick what you want to pick from as an NFT, as a piece of art, but also we have other programs that we're working on internally. For instance, the forensics evidence, how you carry on a forensic evidence from A to Z, and all the stages and all the steps that you need to go through to secure the evidence, but more importantly, to make sure that the evidence actually counts for the crime that the court or the prosecution wants to prosecute. So that's one project that we are thinking about. It's on our agenda and something probably we will see soon.
All right. Alex, I want to bring it back to you now. In terms of, again, the hardware used, at the moment, I believe that this is largely accessed through a smartphone and some kind of app on a smartphone. What do you anticipate for the future in terms of the actual physical technology? How far away are we really of walking around with a microchip implanted that will have our digital ID? Because you lose your smartphone with your ID on it. I mean, I'm sure that's going to be as problematic as losing your physical passport. Granted, the data is on the blockchain, but where are we in terms of what we can expect for the future in terms of the technical, physical hardware to access this?
That's an interesting question. And apparently, there was an event in Odessa, Ukraine, 2 years ago, and the guy on the stage actually implemented NFC unit into his arm. So this was 2 years ago in Ukraine, by the way. And they were doing like online recording of this. Personally, I think that, first of all, we don't have such government plans in Ukraine to do this for our citizens. But I think we're not far away from this. Because, just if you give an idea how our police check in my driver license if they stop me, they have the same DIA app. So they open an app, and they have like a scanner, and they enable camera scanner. Then they check my QR code that I'm showing of my driver license. And when they receive this QR code on their device, they send request to database of Ministry of Internal Affairs, and it returns them answer like if that's valid driver license or not. So for now, you don't need any additional digital equipment. And this was actually also a requirement because before we had to like purchase for the government expense some other hardware to check people identity, which is insane. So we with this approach, we kind of throw it away. But I think NFC marks and other technologies in a couple of years from now will be pretty much available for the people. And I'm personally a fan of CryptoPunk, so I watch like and play games related to sci-fi movies on CryptoPunk. So I totally believe it's going to happen.
All right, Dr. Marwan, I see you nodding there. I think in agreement. Where do you see the future going in terms, again, of the hard technology, the physical tech required to access and transport our digital IDs?
I think in some countries in the world and some regions, we already skipped all the mobile phones and that kind of stuff. You can, in a lot of services, use, in the UK, for example, you can use fingerprint to pay. In China, with Alipay, you can actually pay with your biometrics, with your face only. So you just show your face to the camera when it comes to paying, and you can pay for that. This is in a lot of airports, like in Dubai airport, you can just walk through a certain terminal if you're pre-registered, and you don't have to carry even your passport or mobile or anything. You are your identity. Your biometrics actually are your identity. I know it's a bit scary, but there are other countries and other places where you don't even have to register. Like if you just show your boarding pass in some airports in the world, you can actually check in and check your route that's only visible to you based on your features, not even biometrics, by the way, just like body type and age and that kind of stuff. They can identify you and show you on the screen your identity information or where your flight, where you have to go, customized to you actually and nobody else based on your particular information. We're gonna get there very quickly, I think. I think maybe in the 1 to 3 years, we're gonna see a huge transformation.
All right, yeah. Not that far off. David, I see you wanted to chime in on that point, although I do have another question.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in on that, on this subject generally. I mean, most of these things we can do already. So we can connect our physical identity to our digital identity using biometrics, whatever. The question that I think is more important is where is that data stored and who controls it? And that is why we were looking at the DLT, Decentralized Technology Blockchain. I don't care so much about the technology, it's what it can create or not create. If we store all our identity, biometrics, whatever, in a central database where it's under control of one entity, then I think we have a problem. And that's why we also are looking at the self-sovereign identity platforms and policies, because we don't want to go that way. We want to have a decentralized infrastructure instead, because that makes you in more control of your data again.
Go ahead, Alex.
I just wanted to add something, because it was a really good point that in the future, artificial intelligence will serve as a way to verify your identity, your digital identity to you, based on their biometric. But also, we should remember about hackers who can hack this information. So I think the future of digital identity is not just one way to identify you, but also like It's a biometric. It could be a chip. It could be a voice, because you're all familiar already with the deepfake video technologies that basically allow to hack face recognition technology. So that's my point.
And Nina, to Alex's point, obviously hacking, cybersecurity, government control, privacy, traceability, some of the big challenges that this program presents. Can you give us a quick overview of the biggest points of resistance that you've encountered so far and the biggest challenges?
Yeah, we can talk about a lot of the challenges, not only legislatory, but also the privacy and things like that. I wanted to say here something else. We need to decide to go with the personal data or to go with the non-personal data, because within the field of non-personal data, I think that we have more chances to integrate technology and to use the technology and to scale it up. When we come to personal data, it's very sensitive, okay? But for non-personal data, we can use a huge opportunity in blockchain, and also to show how we can trace the products, how we can trace the documents, and how we can trace the materials. But this is completely different the issue, and we can talk about this for an hour now. What is important to have that at least three elements. Fairness, because we need to be flexible, not to be vendor lock-in, okay? We need trustworthy. We know that the technology is trustworthy, so it brings the trust to the person or to the customers. And we need the security. The security is very important in terms that all the use cases need to have the same standard for the security on blockchain. So what we need to develop are the common standards that we deploy in all the transactions, but also in different fields, so that we can cover different use cases from the point of view.
Dr. Sid, I want to bring it back to you on another big issue. Dubai is also developing a smart city infrastructure. As we said, Dubai, the first city to go 100% paperless. One of the concerns when you go fully digital is what happens in the event of some kind of power outage or when you have no Wi-Fi. Now, that doesn't sound that feasible, but after Dubai, I'm going to Johannesburg, for example, where load shedding is a regular part of life, where you have scheduled power outages, where you just have no power and no Wi-Fi. Europe is facing an energy crisis, and I don't think it's necessarily such a foregone idea that we're going to have a situation where you're not going to have power in certain places around the world. So Dr. Sid, what happens to this idea of a digital ID, which citizens need to interact with government when you have no power and you have no Wi-Fi?
Well, it is a problem, except that in the case of Dubai government, we have a very strong program, preparedness program, that allows you to back up all your systems, to back up all your database, to back up all your identities, all your digital identities. Basically, all your data is backed up. But more importantly, we have a crisis management center, which actually can act and can provide all the solution immediately when there is a crisis. We have seen this in COVID-19 when no one actually could move, how we implemented all the crisis management procedures, how we created the resiliency approach to manage all the infrastructures, whether it is technical infrastructure, electronic infrastructure, database. So Dubai is one of the most advanced city in terms of preparing for the unforeseen. Unforeseen are always events that challenge everybody, but I think we have been prepared. We just actually won an award for Dubai Police, for Dubai City Resiliency program, and it's a program that teaches all types of government agencies how to become resilient in face of crises and other unforeseen events.
But is the idea, Dr. Ma, one to still have a physical paper alternative, or is it to go fully digital and make that obsolete? Are you still going to have a backup and be able to go to the traditional paper system if need be?
It's all about friction. Like probably compare that to carrying your wallet and having a physical card versus the card on your mobile. In your daily life, you're probably more likely to use your digital identity. In some cases, like having a witness in a case, attending court physically, things that need the physical identity, traveling some other country, you will need still your passport, your identity, and the other physical aspects of that. But again, it's a trade-off between the use case or convenience. My wallet has been shrinking over time because everything is moving to the mobile wallet. This is what we're going to see until the point where we carry maybe one super identity. Like the UAE identity, I don't know if you know this or not, is your bank card in some banks in the UAE. So I don't even carry ATM cards. I can withdraw with my MSID card.
David, does the EU intend to go fully paperless and make this a mandatory program?
Not mandatory, and I don't think we can do away with some papers and physical objects. That will be not so responsible, I would say. But of course, the basic identity for natural persons, there should also be an offline possibility, which is cared for now in the development.
On the issue of the EU and the UAE and Ukraine, what are the challenges in terms of interoperability? Because we need to have all of these systems be able at some point to work in conjunction and integrate with one another if this is indeed the way that the global digital ID system is going. Nina, where are we in terms of discussions of interoperability and coordination amongst governments, given that at the moment we do have a coordinated physical system?
Yeah, actually, last week we had a discussion at OECD, for example, and the main question now is the interoperability issue. So if we go into technical interoperability, we know that we need standards to define common standards for technical interoperability, and maybe it would be reachable in a very short time, okay? Then we have governance interoperability. Here we have challenges because the different legislations require different behavior and different rules. And then we have legal interoperability. We need to take into account different rules that appear in different areas of the world. So the most demanding, from my point of view, is the legal interoperability. We can solve this through smart contracts. We can solve this through codification and everything. But still, we will need some dispute resolution issues. We will need some solution that will fit to each other. As soon as we come to technical standards, I believe that we will solve also the different stages of interoperability.
Semantics as well. Semantics,
but it's basic. We need it's basic.
So there does
okay?
need to be at some point some kind of international body coordinating all of this.
Well, in Ukraine, for figuring out the issue with interoperability, we used Estonia example. They have created a project called X-Road. So it's generally like a bus to exchange information and get together all the registers and requests and the responses of different formats into one. And we use the experience in the software. So we have this X-Road, Ukrainian X-Road called Trumbita. And I think it's going to be widely implemented in any environment. So it actually solved a problem of interoperability and exchanging of data of different formats in Ukraine like this. After implementation, there's I know the billion of requests going back and forth every day, and we have 300 national registers. Just to imagine how many of them are like on government and municipal level. And this Trumbita project, or X-Road, if you call it Estonian way, is just figuring this out, and they're able to exchange this data. So I think that's approach could be used for many governments.
So the question is, do we believe in APIs?
I certainly believe in them.
Dr. Sid, I know that a point of concern for many people, of course, is government overreach. I understand that this is decentralized, but we still have the idea of a digital identity, that the government will have access to the data to some degree or another. And Dr. Marwan mentioned things happening in China, for example, which does have a social credit system. There are concerns that a social credit system will be linked to a digital ID, which then will be linked to some kind of taxes, personal consequences, being canceled, if you will, a more dystopian version of how this can go. How are you addressing that challenge?
I think
I'll
we'll
start
both
with
address
Dr.
it.
Sid, yeah.
Dr. Sid, you can start, yeah.
Well, first of all, I don't know, to be honest with you. It is a challenge for most of users. It is something that government agencies take seriously, that there is always a balance between the privacy and between the access to data. But it is a challenge that all the digital transformation itself is actually posing for all government and all countries. This is not something that you can avoid. It's something that it's part of the digital transformation itself. So it behoves to the society, to the community, to the different players to come together and to address those type of issues.
Technically speaking, the UAE Pass is built on PKI, public key infrastructure. So the user is in control always of his identity. So the government does not have that much information. The user has to enable whatever entity that wants its information to get its information. So the authentication key that enables that government entity to get the information is what the user has always. So no, it's not available to everyone. It's not utopian or dystopian, sorry, as you say. And it's a balance in between, you know. It's some onus on the user to protect his mobile and identity and not give his PIN or enable others to use his biometrics for approving transactions. But at the same time, there's of course security and also analytics based on the whole society. If some kind of trend that happens, somebody is trying to hack people's accounts and things like that, or social engineering is one of the most out there right now attacks. All these are preventable using technical enforcements as well, enabling the user to have some power without having too much power to
Right.
be susceptible to hacks.
Always a challenge. And to Dr. Sid's point of everything is becoming digital, as we know. Alex, I wanted you to weigh on this very quickly and then just get everybody's opinion on this, and then we're going to have to wrap this up. We're also seeing digitalization of currencies with central bank digital currencies. Ukraine is launching one. The UAE is looking at one. In fact, the majority of countries are actively looking at a central bank digital currency. Alex, how do you see the idea of a CBDC now working in conjunction with a digital identity?
Well, I think those type of things could be separated and not obviously or not necessarily connected to each other. But the technology itself implies that, and yeah, indeed, we're working on a couple pilots with the National Bank of Ukraine and CBDC in order to completely move cash to cashless economy. And what we see is one of the features of central bank digital currencies is complete transparency. You can actually see where this every cent, where it goes from from issuing to government contracts. If the government where it goes next. So if you can combine this with identity, you have data of unprecedented scale. It's like who exactly spent money when, where, and how it passed.
Right, and that's quite terrifying to many people.
I was just about to say
that is quite terrifying to many people, which is why there is a lot of concern that when you combine a digital identity that is somehow overseen by the government, granted it's decentralized, with a central bank digital currency, that in itself can lead to excessive potential government overreach and control. Dr. Marwan, I see you're nodding. If you can just weigh in on that very quickly.
I think decentralization is one of the biggest weapons or tools for actually enable people to have frictionless money, right? End of the day, you have to look at convenience and frictionless versus, you know, in Dubai, the way we look at everything is actually, especially in digital Dubai,
Pros and
is
cons.
user journeys. You have to pay for something. Do you really need digital currency, or you can pay with your mobile, connect your credit card? What is easier? If you take it one step less, it's better. Make no mistake about it, everybody sitting here is a pioneer, actually. We are doing things that other countries and regions are not even daring to do for a lot of other concerns. You have to put yourself out there, take that leap of faith, and make sure that you are actually at the forefront of this technology,
Right.
understand the risks, and do the right thing through trial and error. You're not going to get it right every time, but you have to. You owe it to yourself to try.
The pros and cons of innovation. I think we need to wrap it up, but I do want to open the session to some audience questions, and I see a gentleman in the back there.